Just ahead of the Delhi elections, the Prime Minister has hit out at both the Congress Party and the Aam Aadmi Party. In his reply to the motion of thanks in Parliament in the Lok Sabha, the Prime Minister targeted Rahul Gandhi and used the phrase urban Naxals. He also brought up the quote-unquote Sheesh Mahal and spoke about, not in a not-so-veiled reference, Arvind Kejriwal and politicians who he said prefer jacuzzis and photo sessions with the poor. Examining the political writing on the wall just before the national capital Delhi votes, I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we'll be decoding the big political messages from the Prime Minister's reply to the motion of thanks in the Lok Sabha. Remember, the President's address, made, of course, customarily on behalf of the government, entered the arena of electoral politics as well as party politics when Sonia Gandhi used the phrase poor thing for President Murmu and Rahul Gandhi used the phrase boring for the speech. The Prime Minister today responded to those comments. Some MPs have also moved a privilege motion against Sonia Gandhi. The Prime Minister made a slew of attacks targeting the opposition, including accusing them of not respecting the constitution and not being loyal to the Indian state. The phrase urban Naxals came up more than once, and the Prime Minister targeted the Gandhi family for what he has alleged is the mocking of President Murmu, who's of course not just the president, but also a prominent female Adivasi leader. That's her background. How do we read the comments made by the Prime Minister? How is politics shaping up? Let's introduce our guests on the program today. We have Abjijit Iyer Mitra with us. He's, of course, a senior fellow at the IPCS as well as a political analyst. Seeing you after a long time, Abjijit. Welcome back to the program.
Okay.
Sanjay Jha is having certain caveats. Oh, I'm back. Am I back? Are you able to see me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah. Shall I? Okay, let me introduce Sanjay Jha. Sanjay Jha is a senior political analyst associated with the Congress. Thanks for being with us, Sanjay. Okay, Barkha's back.
Thanks for stepping in. Briefly lost the network there because I'm traveling. I was introducing Sanjay Jha as an inveterate supporter of the Congress, and I think Abjijit welcomed him on my behalf when we lost the network briefly. Well, good to see you, Sanjay. Also joining us is Sugata Srinivasraju, who's of course an author and a veteran journalist and a columnist. Welcome, Sugata. And also joining us is Madhavan, Narayanan, senior journalist and columnist. Good to see all of you. Let's get straight to it. We'll be playing out some clips there of the Prime Minister. And let me, in fact, bring up the first one, where the Prime Minister accuses the opposition of being fond of photo ops with the poor and jacuzzis, a reference and an attack both on Arvind Kejriwal and Rahul Gandhi, setting the stage for a slew of barbed remarks aimed at the opposition. Listen in.
जो लोग गरीबों की झोपड़ियों में फोटो सेशन कराकर अपना मनोरंजन करते रहते हैं, उन्हें संसद में गरीबों की बात बोरिंग ही लगेगी। आदरणीय सभापति जी, मैं उनका गुस्सा समझ सकता हूं।
So in those remarks there, the Prime Minister was both accusing the opposition of being shallow, of using poverty as a photo opportunity, but also, of course, attacking them for the comments that were made about the president's speech being boring. That was a comment made by Rahul Gandhi. Sanjay Jha, looking back at those comments, do you think Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi provided political ammunition to the BJP just by speaking off the cuff? See, the president does speak on behalf of the government. The opposition is absolutely entitled to criticize that speech by using it as a speech made on behalf of the government. Therefore, the Gandhi's criticism should have been targeted at the government, not at the president. So when you call the president poor thing, when you say, oh, it was boring, you're slighting the president. In retro, and that's what the Prime Minister was really saying there. What did you make of the Prime Minister's speech, and do you believe the Gandhis used their words carelessly?
Barkha, honestly, I think we need to accept it. I think this is a very eminent panel. Abhijit and I may disagree on issues, but I do feel that India's political conversation or public discourse is frankly becoming a little laughable. I was there actually when suddenly I found an implosion of trending on social media when Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, whom I have met on many an occasion, mentioned, I think with a lot of empathy, that, probably the president was exhausted. And I think she expressed in her own way that, she was probably a little maybe under the weather or was exhausted. For
Hmm.
these comments to become a national headline, it tells you two things. One is the bankruptcy, principally in the mainstream media, and to a great extent, the way the BJP uses everything to trigger, as if the attack is on a very distinguished lady holding the senior most constitutional position. I think the whole atmosphere of toxicity that now exists between the ruling party and the principal opposition definitely is reaching a very abysmal and, in my opinion, a very embarrassing level. Because the way I look at it, Barkha, all of us on this program are political junkies and activists or who have a stake of a very different kind. But the large part of India is young, is playing around, is building a career, making their own life story. And for them to hear these things grab the center stage when the country is battling, in my opinion, some very serious, formidable headwinds, I think makes a mockery of the political discourse. So I don't want to make any further comment on that. The Prime Minister has also repeated that. It basically tells you that there is a lot of what I call as a bankruptcy in our intellectual, shall we say, metabolism
Can I ask
that
you
has
before I
happened.
open it up? Can I ask you before I open it up? And of course, the Prime Minister made several other comments. He spoke about tax. He spoke about, what is nationalism. He spoke about the budget, and we'll get to all of those one by one. But just on this issue, Sanjay, unfortunately, politics is ruthless, right? And politics is, to a large measure, about rhetorical banter, barbs and smarmy comments, witticisms, and so on. I don't even think the BJP necessarily believes that Sonia Gandhi was out to mock President Murmu. But a
Mhm.
fumble is a stumble, and your opponent will take advantage. It's just the root, it's just realpolitik, is it not?
Well, but Barkha, I think you answered that yourself, right? When you said that it's a ruthless world, which means that this is
Yeah.
a world where anything can be amplified by anyone to create a huge hullabaloo. As you rightly mentioned, even the BJP is not convinced about what it's doing, but it believes in the susceptibility of the impressionable minds who can be influenced by social media. I'll give you one classic example. The most powerful man in the world, when you had this unfortunate tragedy in Washington, where an American Airlines, crashed to a helicopter and many people died. Guess what his response was? He has got a powerful position. He can create a narrative. He blamed it on DEI. Now, you can always say that that there is a woke culture that has created this other kind of counter narrative. But these are ridiculous, absurd, absolutely preposterous comments that are getting traction. And I think we should not give that traction, frankly.
Okay, it's just interesting that you bring up Donald Trump's example, because that's my exact point, that we live in an age of Trump, Abhijit, and it is less important, and unfortunately, it is sometimes less important what the facts are, and it is more important how they are perceived. And if you live in that kind of social media saturated world, you don't talk off script, or you be like Trump and you talk off script and you don't give a damn. What you can't do is do something in between, whereas you kind of talk off the cuff and then you're
Yeah.
startled when it comes back to bite you. That is, I think, the mistake the Gandhis made. I don't think anybody really believes, of all of us, that Sonia Gandhi was out there to slight President
Yeah.
Murmu. It's just that she handed that, she opened the door a bit and the BJP stormed in.
So, Barkha, I've said this for a long time. Rahul Gandhi is actually a walking, talking advertisement for every teleprompter company. Nobody really needs a teleprompter more than he
Hmm.
does. It's really quite sad because this isn't the first time the Gandhis have handed something like this on a platter to the BJP. Do you remember Alu Sona, Alu Sona? That was
Mhm.
actually a snide on Modi, but the BJP very smartly turned it around and made Rahul Gandhi look like the uh, you know, uh, uh, villain of the piece, or the comedian of the piece, as the case may be. Look, in an era of social media exemplifies a lot. In the early 2000s, when we were looking at the dark web, because there wasn't social media, we used to see this with the deep net, especially with Al Qaeda radicalization. People on the deep web used to find other people in a different village who were freaks like them, and they used to congregate online, which then became real congregations who would join Al Qaeda. ISIS took it to the next level, but this is one of the effects of social media, that it is always the extremes that end up becoming the bastions,
Mm-hmm.
and you will find people always rally around the left or the right bastions. You will see this in every place where social media is used for politics. The most evident area is in, say, Spain and Brazil. Spanish politicians don't use social media that much. On the other hand, in Brazil, which is Portuguese speaking, I might add, they do. And in Portugal, the atmosphere is much, much more vitiated. You've seen everywhere, Germany, UK, America, everywhere where social media is there, this sort of polarization becomes much, much, much greater. I don't necessarily see it as a negative, by the way, because I think people are finally saying the things that they want to. The Overton window shifts more to the left, more to the right. I think the conversations are much more honest out here, rather than any sort of feigned
As long as
civility.
they're accurate, though, as long as they're accurate, they have to
As
be
long as they're
accurate.
accurate.
As long as
And
they're accurate, right?
and just to finish up, I don't think Trump was wrong when he blamed DEI. There are 1,000 vacancies that we know of within the FAA which have come to light, which had been rejected simply because the applicant was white and didn't tick a particular diversity quota. So it may not be particularly accurate in terms of the DC crash, because we don't know who the ATC controller there was, but generally it's fairly accurate about the shortage of ATC operators in America right now.
Right. I've been following that story quite closely, and there's a whole debate there. Was it Trump and Musk who forced the people in leadership positions in aviation out right before this crash happened? Should highly skilled professions actually have representation based on DEI? Because remember, these are professions about life and death. But before we lose ourselves to the world of Trump, just to backpedal and bring it back to our backyard. Sugata, what did you think of the Prime Minister's speech? Now, there's an election. Please, let's remember this budget session is taking place on the eve of an election that is quite intriguing, because polls seem to suggest that Arvind Kejriwal is the favorite. Arvind Kejriwal is sounding more shrill than he has ever sounded before, in my opinion. He's talking about things like mass genocide. Like, if we're going to draw analogies with Trump, he's actually used the phrase mass genocide to talk about what he alleges is poisoned water. And the BJP, if we can come out of these pictures, please, if the BJP, which didn't really field a chief ministerial face, is hoping that the budget bump it will give it a boost in terms of the whole 12% tax exemption. How do you read the political leaves?
Barkha, I mean, I thought Modi was focusing less on Kejriwal and Delhi elections and using the budget to sort of do the talking for him. That is one thing. And the
Yeah.
second thing, he was trying to do was there was an exclusive focus on the Gandhi Parivar, on the dynasty. And I mean, the whole thing was a response to Rahul Gandhi's speech in many ways. If you, I
Yeah.
just went on making a list of things that he was saying, and every single thing, there are at least 8 or 10 points that I noted down, and everything was a kind of response to Rahul Gandhi. That is, it could be democracy, it could be constitution, it could be the absence of development under Rajiv Gandhi, how the Parivar, in fact, Modi tried to do even a mock poll there, I mean, asking how many people from the SC/ST community had three members of their families at the same time in the parliament, things like that. So I think he was very focused on Rahul Gandhi. Rahul Gandhi, I mean, in his speech, I thought he began well yesterday, but suddenly, as I mean, he lost his way. And no,
Hmm.
6 months. I mean, there's a classic Rahul Gandhi there. 6 months back, he was campaigning hard on saving democracy, constitution, and all of those issues. But yesterday, when he spoke, I was a little dumbfounded that he was talking so much about China, where democracy does not exist and where there is no liberal constitution. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he was, I mean, Modi was saying India is great. Trump is saying we'll make America great again. And here's
Yeah.
Rahul Gandhi speaking that China is great. Things like that, they have a certain way of getting around, and which means, the simple point is, Barka, that the Gandhi family, especially Rahul Gandhi, forget Sonia Gandhi. She did not mean what she meant the other day. I think she just slipped
Yeah.
up. But they have not taken their the Modi era seriously. They don't have a political idiom yet. They have not
Okay.
realized that they need to counter Modi or build a certain kind of idiom which will counter them. And which they don't seem to have. They're frivolous. They take it
Mm-hmm.
very casually. In fact, when Modi was speaking today, at some point the camera was panned. I think it was deliberately done on the opposition benches, and Rahul Gandhi was not there. That's immediately after Modi had asked that question. Whether any member of the SC/ST community, family of the SC/ST community, had three members at the same time. Then he had
Mm-hmm.
spoken about the Prime Minister's museum. At that point, Rahul Gandhi, I don't think, was in the house. There was a camera. He came back later, I think. But
Yeah. I'm not sure
the-
because in some
yeah,
sections I did see him sitting there. I don't know if
no,
at
he
that
was
precise
there,
moment.
but I think he
Yeah.
had briefly gone out, and I think came back. So
Okay.
something was amiss
Before,
there.
before you've made a lot of important points. You've said, why did Rahul Gandhi spend so much time on China? Rahul Gandhi seems to have lost the momentum. He seemed to have regained after the Lok Sabha elections. China was a poor example if you're going to make an argument about democracy. And before Madhavan comes in, I'll just play out just a 10-seconder of Rahul Gandhi. He also mocked the Prime Minister for not being invited to the Trump inauguration. And you're absolutely right that Modi was very marginal in a way about Kejriwal. A lot of his speech was about the Congress, about the Gandhis. Yeah, you want to add a line there, Sugata?
Just a line there, because you mentioned Trump, and Abhijit also
Yeah,
spoke so much about international,
yeah,
politics. See, I wish Rahul Gandhi had focused on the new tariff regime that Trump is trying to impose. There is an immigration crisis. A lot of Indians have been shifted back. Instead, he went on and on about China, pontificating on production versus consumption.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was like a seminar, talk which had no political insight or political idiom embedded in it.
Okay, you've raised a couple of very important points. I just want to play out what Rahul Gandhi said. I mean, you're absolutely right that he said a lot about China, but the bit we're just playing out is how he's mocking the Prime Minister for not being called to the Trump inauguration. And Modi is going, now we know, in February. So it was a bit of a dated comment, but take a look.
When we talk to the United States, we would not send our foreign minister to invite our prime minister to his coronation. We would not send him 3 or 4 times, please invite our prime minister. Because if we had a production system and if we were working on these technologies, the American president would come here and invite the prime minister.
Madhavan, let's bring you in. Before that, Sanjay Jha had a brief 30-second interjection. Sanjay, I'll let you have that and then go to Madhavan. Sanjay? I can't hear Sanjay.
A very quick rejoinder to what I think Sugata said. I don't agree with him at all, and I'll tell you 2 points. Number one, on the Constitution, Rahul Gandhi on the floor of the Parliament repeated for every Indian citizen to hear that the RSS, the ideological gurus of the BJP, Mohan Bhagwat went on record to say that India's independence did not happen on August 15th, 1947. It happened at the time of the Ram Temple consecration ceremony. I think that's a significant statement that I'm sure it is echoing across households, that the BJP and the RSS had a very different concept of India's constitutional independence. That I think is a very powerful, loaded statement that he made. So I don't think he was any different from what he campaigned earlier vis-a-vis what he said. Point number two on China, I think we should not lose the subtext of that entire argument. That on China he was on dot for simple reason, and I'll tell you why. Because I follow economic trends very closely. China remains. There was, you remember, Barkha, you and I used to talk during the time of Dr. Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister. During that time, there were a slew of books in all the libraries and the bookstores about the China versus India story. What's the growth rate after 2014 since Mr. Modi became Prime Minister? China is today sitting on a 20, nearly 19 to 20 trillion economy, Sugata. India is not even reaching 4 trillion as of today. Let's not even get into the growth rate.
No, no, no,
Even if
no.
China's growth rate today is 4.5%, it is adding almost close to $1 trillion in GDP, which is close to 25% of our GDP.
Okay,
So what I
okay.
was trying to say, my last line, Rahul Gandhi was basically making a very true, emphatic point that it may be an authoritarian regime. It is an absolutely wrong and disingenuous statement to make that Rahul Gandhi was talking about democracy in China. What he was saying was
No, no,
that
no, no.
India today runs a trade deficit with
No,
China.
no,
India, just a minute, let me
All
finish. I interrupt
okay.
you. That
no, no.
India today actually has lost that momentum, the animal spirits that Dr. Singh had unleashed when he was Prime Minister.
Okay. I think, let me come in here. I have to go to Madhavan. I think the point Sugata was making is that when you look for a country to draw an analogy with, and you have been such a strong proponent of the democracy argument, China may not be your best story to spend so much time on, but we'll come back to it. Sanjay, Madhavan's waiting. Let's be fair. Okay, you have a sentence. Can we unmute Sanjay? Sanjay needs to be unmuted. Yeah. I'm really sorry. Maybe you've muted yourself
Yeah.
at your end.
No, I
Yeah.
haven't. Barkha, please understand that when there are comparisons of economies which are considered to be large economies. So when you talk of India, the comparison will always have to be with China, Brazil, South Africa, etc. It can't be done with a small country, which is why whenever you talk of India's GDP growth rate, it will have to be with countries which are seem to be very similar in terms of their economic might or heft.
Okay. Can I now please go to Madhavan, and then Abhijit and Sugata can come with your interjections? Go ahead, Madhavan.
I quite liked all the three speakers preceding me. Actually, all of them had very valid points, I must say. But the essence of why this thing is getting mixed up is because of what I call a complete lack of political savvy on the part of Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi. Let's come to that
Hmm.
point. Whether it is talking about, there is a fine line dividing honesty and naivety, and Rahul
Yeah.
Gandhi and Sonia seem to be politically naive in a context that is dramatically different from the one they grew up in and they nurtured. Please,
Right.
let's go back to Nehru to really get the context. Nehru brought in parliamentary democracy into India, the British style Westminster democracy. What Modi has done, as I've said before in your show, he has presidentialized the parliamentary consciousness and taken it back to what I call Sanatanic conservative nationalism. Now, there has been a backsliding of democracy worldwide, and Abhijit was right in its own way that Trump is acting like a monarch, and not just a European monarch, but like an African monarch. So,
But he's
this,
elected fair and square. He's
yeah,
elected fair and square.
which is why the world is going through a phase where substantial nations are going through social situations where there is an elected autocracy, because I call, from a political science point of view, something called the citizen subject dichotomy. A lot of the mass, what we call it, are subjects, are happy to be subjects rather than citizens who are unaware, which is why I laughed at two words that occurred during the conversation today. One is your mention of witticism. I see absolutely no witticism these days from any of the parties, whether it's Kejriwal or Rahul or Modi. There is a certain bitterness in the communication throughout, so that old parliamentary charm is lost, and the
Yeah.
BJP and its incredible propaganda machine has successfully engineered a culture in which any dissent is portrayed as anti-national, or any criticism of the government is seen as a act of rebellion. As
Yeah.
so they
I
there
think
a
that's
lot
a
of the
fair. I think that's a fair
a
point.
lot,
I
a
think.
lot of the words they a lot of the words they use belong not in the modern parliamentary democracy. They treat the state as sacred. In a modern parliamentary democracy, nothing is sacred. So
No, the
when
state,
they
I disagree slightly there. I think no government is sacred, but the Indian state has always been sacred. These are two different
no no
things. No
no no
government, no government should be sacred. No government, in my
no no
opinion. But the
let me
state is a
elaborate.
sacred, the compact between the citizen and the state is a sacred relationship.
In principle, but in practice, if you look at it, the CPM used to describe the Indian state as semi-feudal, whereas the right wing, RSS, used to describe the parliamentary democracy as some kind of a Western thing. So they want, they who are the people they adore and revere. That gives you an idea. Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru are adored by the Congress, whereas Savarkar, Shivaji, look at the amount of bandwidth. You're talking about Rahul Gandhi devoting time to China. Let me say the BJP devotes a lot of time to ancient kings. And so the whole idea that the era of kings are gone is not part of the BJP vocabulary.
Okay,
So,
you've raised this.
one last point. What they
Okay.
have done successfully is to, now this is the most important thing I want to say, that they've altered the zeitgeist. That's the word I
Yeah.
want to use. They've altered the zeitgeist where there is a Tamil saying that in the kingdom of nude people, the man who's fully clothed is a mad person. Today, if you're talking in a monarchical context worldwide, where there are extremes of right-wing resurgence, you bring in this nuances of parliamentary democracy, backstage humor, poor thing, and
Yeah.
it all gets lost.
Can I
You
come
have
in?
to let me add my own humor. Politics in the modern context is about faking honesty. It's not about being honest. And
Okay.
Rahul Gandhi is very
Now
poor at it.
now let me speak. The world does change in a way that we don't always like or relate to, right? I think the biggest example is in media. I mean, I can turn around and say, "Oh, I've been a journalist for 30 years. Why is my media age defined by influencers?" I can either lament or whine or complain nonstop and be just left behind, or I can hunker down and say, "You know what? I won't give up my values, but I need to adapt." As I think Sugata said, you find your idiom. You look for your idiom, you work hard to build an idiom, and in a changing world, you look for how you can still communicate. You can't stop the changing of the world. So you're correct in saying that the BJP has changed the political rule book, but till somebody else comes and changes or writes a new rule book, this is how it is. Now you raise an important question, Madhavan. The phrase urban Naxals. It used to be a TV channel phrase. I think Arun Jaitley used it first. Today, the Prime Minister used it. And he used it once again to target the Gandhis. Let's play that out and come right back to the panel. Take a look.
और वो भाजपा के नहीं थे, वो जनसंघ के नहीं थे। हम संविधान को जीते हैं, इसलिए इस सोच से आगे बढ़ते हैं। आदरणीय अध्यक्ष जी, ये देश का दुर्भाग्य है कि आजकल कुछ लोग अर्बन नक्सल की भाषा खुलेआम बोल रहे हैं। और अर्बन नक्सल जिन बातों को बोलते हैं, इंडियन स्टेट के सामने मोर्चा लेना, ये अर्बन नक्सल की भाषा बोलने वाले इंडियन स्टेट के खिलाफ लड़ाई की घोषणा करने वाले न संविधान को समझ सकते हैं, न देश की एकता को समझ सकते हैं।
Now, this is what Madhavan was talking about, Abjijit, that how the BJP has presidentialized parliamentary proceedings. I agree with him on that. And how today, this idea of being anti the Indian state and therefore anti-national is an idea that the BJP has politically weaponized with, I think, a degree of success. But if you again bring it down to basics, what does this phrase mean, urban Naxal? And obviously, he's targeting Rahul Gandhi. What's going on here, according to you?
So first, this is cause and effect. Remember when the BJP was in opposition before 2014, they used to keep getting called fascist and things like that, right? They've come up with their own version, the right-wing version of fascist, to hurl back at the Congress. That said, the urban Naxal word, I don't agree with anti-national, but urban Naxal is a very, very accurate term. This comes from the writings of Mao Zedong when they were in exile in Gansu province during the, Mao Zedong sat out the entire war. It was the Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists that fought the Japanese. He came up with this very curious idea, which is to say the communists should float through society like a fish through water, and they should exacerbate the contradictions of purpose, as he calls it in his little red book, which is what? You provoke the government into, you keep attacking the government physically and provoke them into becoming more and more and more oppressive till it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, part of the Naxal ideology, which was inspired a lot by Mao Zedong himself in India, was to do just that. If you remember, when the entire thing started off under Siddhartha Shankar Ray in Bengal, the whole point was to make the government extremely brutal. Siddhartha Shankar Ray fell into that trap and became extremely brutal. And that was the entire Naxal playbook. Now, when you say urban Naxal, it is exactly that. You take it to the point, you take it to breaking point, be it the farmers' protest, be it the Kudangulam protest. To be fair to Modi, he didn't do what, and I preferred P. Chidambaram's solution to the Kudangulam protest, which was to beat up that good 11,000, and I will call them anti-nationals, and put sedition cases on them. Very good. I salute P. Chidambaram for doing that. But it was very much from the Naxal playbook. It was theoretically, historically, it is an extraordinary.
But in this context, in today's context, in very briefly, because I want Sanjay Jha to come in and everybody else.
Context,
in today's context, what does it mean?
It is exactly that. It is anti-development. It is meant to aggravate social tensions to the point where these, to breaking point, where the state actually cracks down and starts taking repressive measures. The whole point is to induce the state to, cross that threshold where the people then turn against it. But it is goaded into doing that.
Okay, Sanjay Jha, we've moved well beyond now the initial debate around President Murmu. And I think Sugata made a perceptive comment that Prime Minister Modi was focused on the Congress party. I think Kejriwal was very incidental for him, in a way, right? How do you see this use of the phrase urban Naxal? He didn't take Rahul Gandhi's name as Rahul Gandhi, but clearly he referred to when Rahul Gandhi recently spoke of the Indian state being captured by the RSS. I think that was what the reference was to. Again, I will say, was the use of words unfortunate. Rahul Gandhi, as leader of the opposition, could say the Modi government has co-opted institutions of democracy, and that would have been a legitimate point of debate. The Indian state is bigger than the BJP and the Congress. The Indian state, this is not Rahul's India or Modi's India. It is my India as much as it is your India, as much as it is their India. Because the Indian state transcends these political fault lines, which is why I believe that too was a fumble politically. I don't know what you think. Because then it opens up, the opportunity for the Prime Minister to say, "Arey, aap to state ko bhi respect nahi karte."
Barkha, just think about what we are talking this evening. The Prime Minister of this country, the Prime Minister, the highest position in the land, in Parliament, the sacrosanct chamber of the people's collective will, calls the opposition.
Did we lose Sanjay there?
Calls the opposition as urban Naxal. And none of us know what did he really mean. So can you imagine that today a statement or a branding of the opposition is being done using terms that once upon a time I thought was being used by BJP's trollers on social media. And clearly Mr. Modi has given that a complete sanctity. So I asked myself this question. What I used to see from absolutely anonymous egghead trolls of the BJP, or the fanatical extremists who come and abuse you and all of us, if their language or their vocabulary is now being actually repeated and magnified by the Prime Minister, with nobody in the country knowing exactly what it means, other than the fact that it is a very, what I would call is insinuating and calling everybody an anti-national. Because the Naxals are seen as those who are threatening the state. And in the urban context, it takes me back to what Modi said about the Khan Market gang, right? The Khan Market gang was supposed to be more intellectually happening, people who were probably reading the New York Times and probably watched more of NDTV than the other channels during those good old days, Barkha Dutt, and probably had confabulations that had, quotes from very liberal leaning authors. Now, Mr. Modi, as somebody who I think is, let's be honest, in his DNA, he's a hardcore RSS man. I can tell you that it is not easy for him being prime minister. I've looked at him very closely. It is not easy being Modi because he's an RSS man who has to come and bow his head before Mahatma Gandhi's statue. He has to, kind of bow his head before the constitution, which Rahul Gandhi, I think, had a very interesting sardonic dig on. It's a struggle for him. So it's very easy today for Mr. Modi to use the parliament and make
Okay.
everyone who criticizes him as urban accent. Now, my takeaway is anyone who is left of center, I'm not talking about far left, I'm talking about left of center, someone who probably believes that you should spend more on subsidies and fight for the poor, and most importantly, who's pro minorities, people who are actually dissenting against the government and who are actually challenging his authoritarian regime are seen as apostates.
Okay,
They're
I think we've had two very differing perspectives of the phrase urban Naxals from Sanjay and Abhijit, and we must now go to Sugata and Madhavan. Madhavan and then Sugata. Madhavan, go ahead. Yeah, Madhavan, briefly.
Agree with what Abhijit said, primarily because of what Sanjay Jha elaborated. Let me be very specific on this. Protests against the nuclear energy plants is not of Chinese origin at all. Many, Europe has had a very strong environmental movement. The US has had it, and the liberal wokeism. You may criticize wokeism, even I find it sometimes overdone, but really overdone. But the fact is that there is a lot of democracy in India with views coming from California and Europe and Scandinavia. Now, everything is being painted with a single broad brush term called urban Naxal. And we and the media have to, it's also becoming something strange that the media is no longer acting as the arbiter for fact checking and contexting. Everything is being made into a tutu meme. So all that sticks are catchy phrases, urban Naxals. Indira Gandhi was described as a fascist by Arun Shourie once. So fascism is not a new term to India. But liberalism of various kinds, environmentalism, a classic parliamentary democracy in which people are accountable to the legislature, leaders are accountable to the legislature and not just the judiciary, is now being discounted or questioned or assumed not to exist. Now, all this being painted, so any form of dissent is being given the same color as urban Naxals, and many of the people have probably not even heard of Mao Zedong. The people being described as urban Naxals.
But all I will say, and I'll take this back to the point Sugata made and bring in Sugata. You see, the world over, there is a pushback against old elites. Right? We are seeing this. This is a global, if one could identify a global pattern, there is a pushback. The world over, the media is in disarray because you're being challenged both by technology and tribalism. Let's look at what's happening now. For politicians to ride this wave, Sugata, you need a language. You don't want to become imitative versions of what you say you oppose. But what is your language? What is your idiom? I think that is the real question, right? Which is not emerging in the counter Modi politics.
Right. So, Barkha, I'm very glad you brought this up, this idiom thing again. See, in 1919, when Annie Besant was running the Congress party and Gandhi was taking over, Gandhi built a new political idiom. And you will be surprised if you read the archival material of speeches and essays that Annie Besant wrote, the phrases and the terms that she used against Mahatma Gandhi, whom we call Mahatma Gandhi today, were exactly what we use against Modi. Right? And then what was the language that Jaiprakash Narayan used against Nehru, his fellow socialist, fascist? It's on record. I'm not trying to concoct anything. What was the language that Jaiprakash Narayan used against Indira Gandhi? Similarly, you see this all through modern history. See, influences have always been there. When Indira Gandhi was running this country, there were only 5 newspapers to manage and one state-run television channel. But now it's the whole thing is reversed. So Rahul Gandhi cannot be casual. See, for example, yesterday, he said Modi was not invited to the coronation of coronation is not the word. So Sonia Gandhi said, poor lady. Then similarly, he said, we have to fight the Indian state. So he does not know his apples from his oranges. So if you are there in the Modi era, and Modi will have you for breakfast. See, this urban Naxal term was used in thin air. It was just thrust there. But you're fitting into the whole thing because you're actually giving him the opportunity to legitimize that phraseology that was used against you in a fictional manner. And when you talk about electoral roles yesterday, that's again, you see, it's the simple rule that Barkha, you have run news channels and you run a fantastic website. What is the simple thing that you tell your reporters? You say, if you want to make a statement, get me evidence. So yesterday, what was he saying? He was saying that Himachal size ka electorate has been included in Maharashtra. See, you can't sound like he may be right. I am not trying to say that he is wrong. He has every right to demand that these things be put on the table. But when you talk, you have to be so careful that you should not sound like a conspiracy theorist. You can't be a MAGA fellow talking like that fellow, saying that, oh, yeah, pura, everything was stolen. You have
I think that's
language which is very, very important. I completely agree with you.
This casualness, the cavalier sort of use of words, and then say, why does it matter? Why is the media focused on this? Why is Modi focused on this? It doesn't work anymore. I mean, I wish that Parliament was only talking about the quality of air in Delhi. And that's not happening. But then somebody has to come along who can find an effective way to center stage those kind of issues. But everything is about effectiveness. Even in media, as storytellers, there are issues we believe in. But if nobody is going to watch the issues we believe in, what is the point of our belief? You have to have a language of dissemination. Now, before I take last comments, I think somebody brought this up. What did Modi say about Sugata? You brought this up. It was almost like a quiz question for the country when he was talking about three members of the same family in Parliament. This was a interesting, provocative excerpt of the Prime Minister's speech. Let's take a look at it and take last comments.
क्या एक ही समय में संसद में एससी वर्ग के एक ही परिवार के 3 सांसद कभी हुए हैं क्या? एससी वर्ग के एक ही परिवार के 3 सांसद कभी भी हुए क्या? मैं दूसरा सवाल पूछता हूं, कोई मुझे बताए कि एक ही कालखंड में, एक ही समय में संसद में एसटी वर्ग के एक ही परिवार के 3 एमपी हुए हैं क्या? आदरणीय अध्यक्ष जी, कुछ लोगों की वाणी और व्यवहार में कितना फर्क होता है, मेरे एक सवाल के जवाब में मिलता है।
I'll start with you, Madhavan, as we take closing comments. That's, I would say, a very politically, even Sanjay Jha cannot say that that's not a politically legitimate question to raise. Basically, he's talking about the fact that there are 3 members of the Gandhi family in Parliament. He is putting this comment against the backdrop of his allegation that the president, an Adivasi leader, was humiliated or insulted. And he's presenting the sort of institutional elitism of one family. I'm not saying this is what I think. I'm saying this is what the Prime Minister is placing before the country, that these are 3 members of the same family and they didn't give this opportunity to someone from the backward or the downtrodden or the less represented communities.
I think, Barkha, it's important to remember that Modi is a master of optics and he uses precisely the correct words that sink into the, masses in some way, because all over India, with the median age only at 28, we have something like 40 to 60 crore youngsters who feel oppressed by a certain kind of, privileged elite who are inheritors. So this appeals to the consciousness. The irony could be the fact that, somebody like Sanjay Jha can turn around and say, or there is the Adani family. Why don't you talk about family control of big businesses where the same first generation family owns God knows how many businesses with state support? So unfortunately, Modi's narrative works in politics in terms of criticism of dynasties, but not in business. Whereas we are back to what Sugata has been saying. I am completely in agreement with him, which is that ultimately it's about capturing the spirit of the times, finding the right political idiom, and understanding it and giving it as a package. You have to sound honest while actually being a fully rehearsed one. It's like rehearsed spontaneity is what they need and they don't have. And communication theory, I can go on about various kinds, from the way you wear, Raj Mahal has been set against Modi by Kejriwal, but there is no such counter from Rahul Gandhi. They used to talk about his $10,000 suits, but that is bounced off the Teflon skin. Modi has become a Teflon man like Ronald Reagan. So, what Congress really needs? Congress really needs is a communications think tank that at least coaches Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi on what India is right now. They are still living in the past.
Yeah, let me get Sanjay Jha to react to that. That communication has become a performance art. I think we can either whine and whinge about it or just accept that that's the reality and say, okay, what is India's principal opposition party going to do about it, right? That's the question, Sanjay. I take your point that a lot of airtime is spent on, I think somebody in our audience also said, why aren't, the quality of air is not going to change in Delhi, right? And I feel for her as a sort of as an asthmatic who's often sick in Delhi winter. But I recognize that even polls don't capture this as being the overwhelming issue in the minds of the voter. Now, if communication, political communication, media communication is a performance art, it's the art of good storytelling. There cannot be this level of casualness in the tools you use to tell your stories.
Okay, Barkha, let me quickly answer you. We have not addressed the elephant in the room, which is pertinent to me answering your question. Okay. You have been a journalist during the time when Dr. Singh was the Prime Minister. You remember the 2011 Arvind Kejriwal Anna Hazare agitation? I remember 24/7 blanket assault on the government. Was anybody persecuted? Was anybody scared? No. Look at it today. I want to ask Mr. Sugata and anybody on your show, can you name to me one TV channel in India, Hindi or English or vernacular, that has the courage to call out Mr. Modi or Mr. Shah? 0 on 10. There is
the
one.
The channels don't do
India
it
today.
Acha, the channels don't do it, but enough other people do.
Yeah.
I'm saying the channels don't do it. The channels don't do it, but enough other people do.
Yeah. But Barkha, here is the truth. For Modi and the BJP, I meet a lot of the BJP spokespersons on mainstream media channels, okay? And I literally, in my heart of hearts, let me share that with you, I laugh. You know why? Because these guys come for shows in the full comfort that the anchor is going to give them time, that the anchor is going to interrupt me when I'm going to be in the middle of a sentence, that the hashtag and narrative is going to start and conclude with what Mr. Modi says. So Narendra Modi's, it's very easy to pontificate here as to what the Congress should do. And the Congress and the Rahul Gandhi could do better. I'm not arguing about that. But let's, for God's sake, let's not be delusional and hallucinate. This is a one-sided narrative. By the way, Donald Trump in America has the CNN, has the New York Times, has the Washington Post, has the LA Times, has the BBC. They will sue the White House tomorrow if he were to make any inappropriate statement against them. Which brings me to the last point. That end of day, Barkha, they say a patriot, and I think Edward Abbey said that once, that a true patriot is one who was always ready to defend his country against his government. And in politicians, you'll always find that patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. So I think we need to be very real about these realities. I do believe, and I'm very convinced that this whole Elon Musk, the control of X, the way the algorithm is changed, that today I feel it, that, a tweet of mine that would once upon a time generate a lot of traction is no longer happening for many other people. So, I think
Yeah.
you're seeing a different world. Is it right? I don't think so. I think just like the liberals have had a backlash, this is also an unsustainable model.
Well, I have at least one person saying to you, Sanjay Jha, Mr. Jha, don't hang out with the wrong crowds. Come here and hang out with us Mojoites. We promise a completely different experience. So some of us still believe that we don't need to be either Chamchai or Morcha, which is unfortunately the kind of tribalism that is defining our
It's true.
media landscape today. Facts first, as much as possible. But Abhijit, do you want to respond to what Sanjay has said? This is all one-sided. In America, in Trump land, you still have, well, you have the First Amendment to begin with. India doesn't have the greatest record on free speech under any government. May I please say that? Books have been banned by all parties across India. So that's also cultural value that unfortunately we haven't been able to deepen. But given all of that, the Congress will always argue, as you just heard Sanjay as a Congress supporter, former spokesperson, that the media is co-opted. The media is co-opted. Our issues don't get space. It's not that we don't have issues. It's not that we don't have an idiom. Nobody wants to hear us. Nobody wants to platform us, rather.
Look, I remember the days of Congress where, people like Shivarur, Gaurav Sawant, Kanchan Gupta were placed on that watch list of surveillance, and their phones were being tapped. They'd been put on a blacklist and things like that. Let's not forget that. Let's also not forget the fact that, this is a pure function of the market. You look at all the left-wing outlets out here. Where are their sales? The market doesn't lie. I completely agree that Modi can crush media if he wants to. The problem is you can't suppress an entire market. But this is also happening in America. You look at how disastrously CNN's revenues have fallen off. You look at how Washington Post has lost 90% of its online readership. New York Times today is only able to sustain itself because it owns the New York Times building.
And also,
70
Wordle connections, spelling bee, and cooking. Please do not forget.
Yes, and it's literally the New York Times cooking section, along with
Yes.
the rental property that's keeping them afloat. And the New York Times cooking section is actually quite decent, unless they do chili chicken, in which case they get it horribly wrong. But other than that, see, there is a market shift that has happened to the right. It is a very, very fundamental shift that we're seeing in media, at least in the Anglophone countries I follow, and it certainly happened in India. What, for example, go look at shows, for example, on YouTube, which is, you would argue, is a sort of left wing algorithm in that sense. It is what Twitter used to be under Jack Dorsey. And once Elon came, you saw the ridiculous amount of manipulation that Vijay Gadde and Jack Dorsey and they were doing with the algorithms and things like that. How is that not manipulated? Today, maybe Elon Musk is manipulating it, but the market, you cannot distort a market so greatly. I would argue this is all the function of the market. At most, there is some top up being done by the government, which every government in India does. There is no government in India that does not do it. But that's what it is. Take, for example, Ravish Kumar. Who kicked him out of NDTV? Who all these people who have been kicked out of different posts? This Anjum, Sayyid Anjum? I don't know, something Anjum. Some guy called Anjum.
Ajit Anjum.
That's the one who keeps pontificating. His ratings dropped dramatically. This is verifiable. Now, how is that Modi's fault? Modi's fixing the ratings also now.
Well, and also, I will only add one point of differentiation with you, Abhijit, before I give Sugata the closing word. The algorithm likes bias, clearly. At the left, there are enough with respect to Sanjay Jha, maybe not the networks, but there's enough anti-Modi content on digital platforms, I would argue. Just like there's a lot of pro-Modi content also. Let's not pretend that there aren't supplicants and activists. Both of them exist, and they have their own markets. I think this point about market is a very interesting one in both politics and media. Madhavan, I was going to give Sugata the closing word. You have a line? Just a line, Madhavan?
Say that the market is a shifting creature that often is decided by the interest of the moment. So we've seen elections, let's not forget that Modi is today in power with support from Nitish Kumar and Chandrababu Naidu. The market keeps shifting, and so does the media market. Except that what I'm worried about is this whole middle class notion of fact checking, authenticity, accuracy, and setting the narrative not by bias but by contexting. We are now selling content without context. This is where the media has become a mere stenographic engine, which is where what I'm worried about as a journalist.
Okay,
so that is where we need to...
I think we've picked up a lot of philosophical issues, but I think you're right to say the media, the market shifts. Sugata, politics also shifts. The political marketplace also changes. Nothing is constant. In 2024 June, we thought Modi had been contained. It was the rebuilding of the Congress. 6 months later, after the Congress loses the assembly elections, we're again back to thinking it's the age of, of a dominant Modi. The market constantly shifts. An agile person, an agile communicator doesn't surrender values at the altar of the market, but learns to adapt to a changing market.
No, you're absolutely right, Barkha. But one light point,
Yeah.
I think we should pass a resolution on this panel, unanimous resolution that Sanjay should advise the Congress party, because I think he speaks with such conviction and extraordinary clarity. I give it to him on that. So that's on the lighter note. But coming back to your original question on the politics, Barkha, see, when Modi asked that question, is there anybody from the SC family, 3 members at the same time? Then he said ST, and he asked 3 members. But he stopped at that point. He did not go to the next question, which should logically have been, were there any 3 members from a OBC family at the same time in the parliament? He did not ask that. And there lies the future of the Modi politics, which is Akhilesh Yadav was sitting there.
Right.
His wife was sitting behind him. And there was a time when Mulayam, Akhilesh, and his wife were together in the parliament. I think we have to check that, but I think I'm certain about that. So, and this again is a response to Rahul Gandhi, because, see, he began his speech yesterday, by saying that this is the alternate vision that I would have presented on behalf of the India bloc. He said it. But was he mandated by the India bloc, which has not met in the last 6 months? In the India bloc, Farooq Abdullah is speaking a certain language. Mamata Banerjee is speaking a certain language. Akhilesh Yadav and Arvind Kejriwal are fighting the election together against the Congress. So where is the India bloc? Modi has spotted that thing. So, and Modi himself is an OBC. So he is not alienating Akhilesh Yadav. So there is something else in the game. So that is the politics which Modi and the BJP diligently read. So we are not, none of us, I don't think anybody in the panel here are liked by the BJP or the Congress. But, I think we have to point out that there is somebody who works very diligently, and there is somebody who does not do their homework. Rahul Gandhi is casual, unprepared, and does not even think through what he says. That is the problem.
Okay, we have to end it there with just one comment on the market. The market does indeed shift, but the market in India is big enough for also, whether you're a media professional or a politician, to build a base. I think that was the attempt in the Lok Sabha elections, an attempt to contain Modi. It showed that if you work hard, politics is still the art of the possible. But as has been said here, if there's no story to tell, if you're going to be offhand, if you're going to be casual, you can't whine later that your issues have been co-opted. I know, Sanjay, we're all rooting for you at least to get your job back as formally as Congress spokesperson. We should say that you do put up a passionate support, notwithstanding, and you take it on the chin. So I think we need more of us who can have a spirited debate and take it on the chin and not take it to heart. And Parliament should also go back to being that space. And more wit and more banter and more cleverness. And Sugata, you still wanted to say something before I say goodbye?
Parliament, let's also not be nostalgic about Parliament having been a great place. There are times when prime ministers were called nikammas. In the 70s, the kind of language that was used against Morarji Desai and the certain kind of act that he performed, Jagjeevan Ram, the kind of language that was being used against him. So let's not be nostalgic and try to
Fair
say that
enough.
everything was
Fair
great in the
enough.
past and now it's bad.
Fair enough. There's no golden age of anything, politics or media. Life moves on. You move with it or you get left behind by the currents of change. That's what everybody has to understand. We have to leave it there. Sanjay Jha, Abjijit, Iyer, Mitra, Sugata, Srinivasraju, Madhavan, Narayanan, and to our very spirited audience that has its own running debates in the comment section. Thank you so much and see you tomorrow. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.